Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, I had a voice radio, so today we are continuing our look at really good cards that are not played nearly enough. We started off by looking at the Clefairy from Evolutions that can copy attacks and hit some main numbers. We looked at Gumshoe's GX, partly the ability that allows you to look at your opponent's hand, and partly the fact that the GX attack is for 1 energy and could be very useful. And we looked at Mr. Mime that prevents bench damage with stuff like Tapu Koko and Necrozma running rampant. Well, today, ladies and gentlemen, I want to take a look at Alolan Muk, and I have a lot of very good friends, including Mr. Nick Pierce himself, hey Nick, that have told me that it's just about to see a big increase in play. And I feel the exact same way. I think Alolan Muk is about to see a big increase in play, or at least it bloomin' well should do. So to start off by looking at what it actually does, ladies and gentlemen, it is mostly here, and by mostly I mean entirely, about the ability Power of Alchemy. Each basic Pokemon in play, in each player's hand, and in each player's discard pile has no abilities. Now we're going to get more into detail in a moment, but in each player's hand, it means Tapu Lele coming in doesn't get an ability. In play means Oranguru doesn't get an ability, and in the discard pile means that Darkrai GX doesn't get an ability. Now this is really important because at the moment, the only other option we've got for blocking abilities is Garbodor. Hexmaniac got rotated, Silent Lab got rotated. Your two options at the moment are Alolan Muk or Garbodor. The thing is that Garbodor needs to have a tool attached, which means on any turn, if you're really worried about Garbodor, if you need that ability back, you can play a Field Blower, knock that tool off the Garbodor, and instantly get your abilities back. Well, Alolan Muk doesn't need a tool attached. It doesn't need anything. The second Alolan Muk comes into play, it blocks abilities. The difference, of course, is that it blocks abilities only from basic Pokemon, not from any evolved Pokemon. And we can take advantage of this. As a side note, the attack crunch is really expensive and never going to be used. The weakness is rubbish because of Garbodor, but they've still got to use something like a Guzma or a Counter Catcher to bring up the Muk and KO it. And although the retreat cost is huge, that does mean you get to use Heavy Ball to search it out, so it could be an awful lot worse. So let's start off then by looking at the abilities that it actually does block. Now, there aren't that many basic abilities around at the moment that see a huge amount of play, but the ones that are around are utterly amazing. We've got Tapu Lele. Now, Tapu Lele's got to be the big one. Tapu Lele has got to be the one with which I begin this discussion. It's got the ability Wonder Tag that allows you to search your deck for any supporter card and put it into your hand. Alolan Muk means you can't do that anymore, and there's so many different ways of doing this. You could start off, for instance, by blocking supporters in the early game like N and Professor Sycamore that your opponent will want to use in order to get set up. As a fun little extra here, do remember that if your opponent benches a Lele with an Alolan Muk out, the Lele still goes onto the bench. They just don't get to use the ability, but they have then wasted the bench, which is kind of mean, but also kind of hilarious. But it's more than just blocking your opponent setting up. Golisopod decks really want to use Tapu Lele at times. I know they play Garbodor, but oftentimes they'll take advantage of when Garbodor doesn't have a tool attached to search out an Ace Roller to heal it up. Well, they don't get to do that. I mean, since Guzma and Tapu Lele have been in the format, how many times have you seen your opponent Tapu Lele for a Guzma for the win, or before that, Tapu Lele for a Lysander for the win? The answer is a lot. A ridiculous amount of times. As someone who commentates a Pokemon trading card game, I often sit there saying, they just need a Guzma or a Tapu Lele for the Guzma, or an Ultra Ball for the Tapu Lele for a Guzma, or a Trainer's Mail for the Ultra Ball for a Tapu Lele for the Guzma. You get the point here. Well, if you've got an Alolan Muk out, they lose that option. Tapu Lele is the big thing that you get with Alolan Muk. And you can build your deck using stuff like Octillery, for instance, so that you're less reliant on Tapu Lele, while blocking both players, you and your opponent, from being able to use the Tapu Lele. That's what's so good here. You also block Oranguru, which is used in a lot of decks because it's searchable with Bridget. It's a single card. It can be used on turn 1, etc. Generally, people pick Oranguru or Octillery. Well, if they pick Oranguru and you get an Alolan Muk out, they lose it. Volcanion decks really rely on Volcanion EX and its Steam Up ability, so you get to block that with Alolan Muk. The one caveat here is that since we've got the combination of Ho-Oh and Kiawe in Burning Shadows, your opponent now does always have the option of just playing a Kiawe, getting all the energy onto a Ho-Oh, and then being able to hit for 210 with a Choice Band, meaning they are slightly less reliant than they would usually be on having that Volcanion EX's ability. But it's still really good because, of course, the non-GX or baby Volcanion, hey Nick, is really useful with Steam Up. You get decent damage while accelerating energy. That option goes away if the abilities are turned off. Darkrai GX decks really like that Resurrect ability so that they can get Darkrai from the discard pile onto the bench with a Darkness energy attached. Well, that gets turned off and really hurts speed Darkrai decks if there is an Alolan Muk on the field. And the other one, and there may well be more, if there are more, chuck them down in the comments. I'm not going to go through every basic ability. I'm just hitting some of the major ones here just to demonstrate how useful Alolan Muk can be. How about Eevee? Eevee's really good because you attach a basic energy and then you get to evolve it from the deck. Attach a psychic energy, grab an Espeon and evolve straight away on turn 1. Grab a Sylveon, as long as you go and pop a Fairy energy onto Eevee. Now, of course, if they do that turn 1, you're not going to have got an Alolan Muk in play. One super annoying option you would have is actually using a Wally on turn 1 to evolve into an Alolan Muk. So if you go first and get a turn 1 Wally, you can actually make sure that your opponent doesn't have stuff like Tapu Lele for the entire game. And there are enough players that rely on it almost entirely that might be worth trying, although it does seem a little bit greedy. Good if it works. While playing an expanded tournament on my Twitch the other day, twitch.tv/PTCGRadio, I used a Hex Maniac on turn 1, and then got an Alolan Muk turn 2, and my opponent just scooped. They just gave up the game. There was nothing they could do. Now, you cannot do that nowadays in Standard with Hex Maniac being rotated, but certainly a Wally into an Alolan Muk on turn 1 could completely shut your opponent down. Now, the good news at the moment, at least if you're excited about Alolan Muk like I am, is that there are a whole bunch of decks that do rely on abilities, but abilities of evolved Pokemon. And that's what I'm really thinking about here, because these decks, like Zoroark GX for instance, you can have your Alolan Muk in play, and then your opponent doesn't get Tapu Lele, your opponent doesn't get Oranguru, they're struggling to set up. But you still get your trade ability, which will allow you to get extra cards. Decks like Gardevoir that rely on Secret Spring on Gardevoir and Premonition on Gallade, and a lot of the time, Abyssal Hand with Octillery. But with Alolan Muk, then, your opponent doesn't get their abilities. How about Vikavolt Tapu Bulu? You still get Strong Charge with Vikavolt, but your opponent doesn't get their abilities. Of course, I've mentioned it once or twice, so let's mention it now. Octillery is an evolved Pokemon. So if you make the choice of Octillery over Oranguru, and then you play Alolan Muk, you get to lock your opponent's Oranguru out of the game, while taking advantage of your Octillery, and really gaining that advantage in terms of consistency, in terms of drawing extra cards. Metagross is a fun one here because you're relying on your ability to accelerate energy while blocking your opponents. And how about Decidueye's Feather Arrow, which stops your opponent being able to use abilities? And against Decidueye, something your opponent will often want to do at one point is use a Tapu Lele to go and search out an Acerola to heal off a bunch of that damage that's been done by Feather Arrow. Well, no more, ladies and gentlemen. Not if you've got an Alolan Muk in play. Of course, the huge downside to Alolan Muk, and the reason it doesn't see as much play as it could, is because it takes up a bunch of space. It's a stage 1. And I talked about it in something like Gardevoir, but then you're playing Gardevoir as a stage 2 and Octillery as a stage 1, and then you're playing Alolan Muk as a stage 1, and I don't know if people are going to be able to use this. Rabombi is a great tech. in Gardevoir decks, searching out 2 energy per turn. But the reality is most people in their Gardevoir decks cannot find the room, and that's a bit of an issue. But really the point of this video is to tell you how good Alolan Muk could be, how much of an advantage it could give you if you can find room to play it. I'm not expecting you to go and put a 1-1 line of Alolan Muk in every deck you ever play from now until the end of time, / the rotation. But I am expecting you, or hoping, or wishing, that you sit there and think, hang on a second, Alolan Muk could be a lot of fun. Now, as a quick side note, there is a GX that you could play as a literal one-off here, if you're already playing Alolan Grimer for the Alolan Muk. However, it's not amazing. You do get the 0 energy GX attack, drag one of your opponent's bench Pokemon into the active, and now they're burned, paralyzed, and poisoned. But it does give up 2 prizes and is weak to fighting, so something to bear in mind that this could be a fun tech because it is literally for 0 energy. Though if we're struggling to find room for the Alolan Muk with the ability, I worry we'd be struggling extra heartily to find room for this one. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time of the video, so chuck down in the comment section. Tell me what you think about Alolan Muk. Tell me if you think it's as underplayed as I think it is. Tell me what decks you think it could be good in. Let me know, ladies and gentlemen. I'd love to hear from you. Go nuts! Be nice. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at @TheWassy, and Twitch at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. That's where the live action happens. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts, etc., you can do so at patreon.com/PTCGRadio. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.